From the last stylebender facing his biggest rival once more at light heavyweight, to the massive challenge of creating a potential trilogy matchup, here's everything you need to know about Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3. Despite moving up a weight class and failing to secure the title already, Izzy wouldn't mind doing it all over again. The last time Adesanya tried his luck at the light heavyweight title was back at UFC 259, when he took on the Polish powerhouse in a fight that went the distance, with Jan getting the decision victory. It was a tough night for the last stylebender since he didn't just miss out on double champ status, but it was also the first loss of his professional MMA career. The middleweight champ moved back down to his native division, solidifying his reign as champion before finally taking on his rival, Alex Pereira. Now, I don't really need to tell you their history, but saying these guys hated each other would be an understatement. And regardless of Izzy's exceptional performance at UFC 281, Pereira still managed to get the victory after a last-round TKO that sent the Nigerian packing. The rivals met once more at UFC 287, with Israel finally getting his revenge, winning back the middleweight title. And while things have sort of settled down after their last matchup, the last stylebender wouldn't mind risking it all if Alex becomes king in the 205-pound division. Of course, that's an extremely difficult task, because the former champ doesn't just have to go through Jan, but he'll also need to take on the light heavyweight title holder Jamahal Hill for Izzy to even consider a matchup. It's obvious he has no interest in fighting him again with nothing in it for him, and what better than the light heavyweight title on the line to convince Izzy for a rematch? But Izzy needs to defend the middleweight title once more before he can even think about it. Look, you can't blame Adesanya for wanting two titles to his name, because when you've dominated an entire division, fighting the same opponents over and over again is probably very boring. So he's looking for new challengers, and since being a double champion has always been an ambition of his, it makes sense why he'd be willing to fight Pereira in a trilogy fight with a second title on the line. And as much as I'd like to see that fight unfold, Israel needs to focus on holding his current position, because there's a new threat in the division, and his name is Dricus du Plessis. Despite being sidelined by the entire MMA community, Still Knox has pulled off an absolute miracle after putting an end to Robert Whittaker in the second round at UFC 290. And because he was promised a title fight, Izzy will again be in uncharted waters as he faces an opponent he's never fought before. So he can talk all he wants about this potential trilogy clash against Pereira. But the truth is, he needs to prove himself as the middleweight champion again before he looks to new horizons. And I know what you're thinking. A lot of MMA pros think du Plessis will be a piece of cake for the Nigerian. But that's exactly what they said about Still Knox's matchup against Whittaker as well. The Reaper was the clear favorite going into the fight, and look what happened to him. I mean, the South African completely dominated the match, and if I were Izzy, I'd be a bit worried. Besides, Israel also needs Alex to be at his best for the fight to happen again. If we assume for a second that the Nigerian champion defends his title successfully and clears the division of competition once again, Alex will still need to go through two brilliant fighters for this fight to become a possibility. No offense, but his chances against Jan are already slim enough, considering how the Polish fighter is a beast on the mats. Despite wanting the fight to happen, even Izzy predicted that Pereira will suffer the same fate he did, saying Blachowicz will take the fight to the ground and pound him with his devastating hammer fists from hell. Still, if the Brazilian shocks the fight world and folds the Polish powerhouse with his explosive striking, he'll still need to face the dangerous Jamahal Hill for the light heavyweight title. And that's a really interesting fight since there's so much on the line. After Jamahal defeated Glover Teixeira, who just so happens to be Pereira's coach, he's really eager to avenge his mentor's defeat, so Pereira can't wait to get his hands on the champ, but easier said than done, since he has to take on two freaks of nature in the 205-pound division to get his glory back. But is the fight even possible in the first place? Well, if you think about it, even Izzy doesn't want to fight Alex at middleweight anymore. He talked about it in depth during an interview with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour podcast, and the champ even mentioned how the fans probably have no interest in it as well, since they've seen it unfold multiple times now. And believe it or not, the only reason why Izzy did UFC 287 was because he knew Alex was beatable. Had he known he had no chance at beating the mighty Powhatan, he would have called quits on the matchup, never fighting him again. And from a fan's perspective, a trilogy fight sort of makes sense since both of them are 1-1 at the UFC. And what better way to settle the scores than to lock them inside the cage again with the title on the line? But since Alex is done with the middleweight division and wants to fight at 205 cause of the insane weight cut he had to go through, the chances of the fight happening are way lower. Plus, Izzy famously said that he doesn't care about all the times he lost to Alex back in their kickboxing days, declaring that he doesn't keep score and only settles them. So he has little reason to get in the octagon again with him, but if he was counting his losses back then into the equation, Pereira would be ahead by miles with 2 more wins over him. There's still the most important factor of it all, which is if Dana White would be on board with it. Let's not beat around the bush, people. Everyone knows Dana is a money-hungry businessman who does what's best for the UFC. And since MMA fans have seen the 2 elite strikers go at it before, does the rivalry still have enough power to squeeze out another big check for the promotion? I mean, Izzy's win brought some real good closure to their story, so to bring it all back up in the middleweight division could be a disaster. But if they face off in the light heavyweight division, that could bring in some big bucks for the UFC. Look, even though they've fought each other multiple times now, the fight is more than what it looks like at face value, because it'll be the last stylebender trying his luck again at achieving greatness. It's the same as Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev. While Islam had more on the line in that fight, it was actually Volks who had more to prove cause if he'd won. The lightweight title would be his, making him a champion in 2 weight classes. It's not like Izzy's title would be on the line, but then again, that just makes it a win-win situation for Adesanya, because really, what's the worst that could happen? He'll lose to Pereira again? Considering the risk-to-reward ratio, it's a fight that Izzy would gladly entertain. But even though Adesanya seems more pumped for this matchup, there are still huge problems to solve before they can even think of a trilogy. Honestly, I think the chances of this fight ever happening are very low, and that's mainly because of the problems they'll have to solve to make it happen. Like I mentioned before, aside from the grueling fights both of them will have to go through, it's still hard to make the fight possible, because as fans, worrying about the details isn't our headache. But the amount of factors that go into making it happen are insane to deal with. So deciding on the perfect venue, making sure that their times match up, and above all, to make both fighters agree on the match is a huge deal for the UFC to make. I mean, their rivalry is one of the biggest the UFC has ever seen, right up there with Cormier and Jones. So to make a fight worth closing the whole chapter is a massive challenge. And there you have it, folks. From the massive challenge of creating a potential trilogy matchup to the last stylebender facing his biggest rival once more at light heavyweight, that's everything about Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3.